Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z. Welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, I am answering your questions all about narcissistic abuse, co-parenting with narcissists, how to navigate a narcissistic relationship, and how to exit one safely. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, I'm answering your questions. About a week or so ago, I posted a question block on my Instagram stories at drjamiezuckerman.com, and a ton of you had asked questions that you had wanted me to answer on the podcast, which, I always say, no question is a dumb question, and I guarantee you that what you're asking, a bunch of people also have the same question as well. So I'm going to take this time to address your questions, and hopefully you will find some comfort in these responses and maybe learn something that you didn't think you even needed to learn. So I'm just going to go through my list of my questions that I got, starting with how to flirt after healing from heartbreak to meet new dates. So I'm assuming this person meant after you have broken up with somebody or left a relationship with somebody who was a narcissist, where you experienced narcissistic abuse. We know that type of relationship is extremely jarring. It really strips you of your sense of self. It really strips you of your sense of identity. And part of the healing process when you leave these relationships is not only navigating the world without this person, not only are you trying to kind of come to grips with missing somebody who was also simultaneously abusive, or feeling that you still love this person, even though they were abusive, which a lot of people report and is nothing to be ashamed about. One of the things I hear people say often along the lines of this question is, how do I date again? And really, I think what they're saying is, how do I even trust somebody again? How is that even possible after this person who I thought was supposed to love me unconditionally, be there for me, support me, and presented that way in the beginning? When the mask fell off, you realize you're dealing with somebody that you didn't even recognize. And so going back into the dating world, following a breakup like this, there's a lot of levels to this. So it's not a normal breakup, which I've said many times before. It's a type of breakup where it requires an actual exit strategy. The reason for that is because they will do many manipulative things to suck you back in. And in their eyes, because you're property, because you are an object of theirs, they technically, in their mind, never let you go. Doesn't mean they want to be with you, and it doesn't mean they're ever going to respect you or treat you like you should be treated. However, they still view you as theirs. They have ownership over you. So even after the breakup, there's still what we call post-separation abuse. And if you have children with this person, that continues well through the family courts and well even after that. So part of healing afterwards isn't just about getting over this person. That's actually probably one of the smaller parts of it. The biggest part in healing is, how do you reestablish your sense of self and your self-identity? How do you get to a place where you're able to trust yourself enough to be able to make accurate assessments of other people in your life? Because remember, for so long, you had been gaslit into believing that your friends didn't really care about you, your parents didn't have your best interest in mind, and this obviously was used as a tool to isolate you from family and friends so that you could not share with them the abuse, that they weren't around enough to see the abuse. So how do we do that? So what I tell people, and this obviously is going to vary from relationship to relationship and person to person, I really recommend that my patients do not date for at least a year after this breakup. And again, that's going to vary. I understand that. But if you find yourself jumping into another relationship very quickly after one that you experience narcissistic abuse within, chances are it's because you don't like feeling how you're feeling, which I get, makes total sense. And so to avoid that discomfort, you jump into another relationship so that you can focus on something else, so that you don't have to sit with this, so that you don't have to deal with this. And in addition to that, what that does is it doesn't allow you room to, one, develop your sense of self separate from somebody else, but it continues to perpetuate that narrative that has been sold to you by the narcissist that you can't function without them. You can't function without anybody else. You can't function without somebody defining your worth, defining this whole narrative for you, who you are, what your interests are, what your values are, what your morals are. Even what's your favorite color, right? You've lost all of that along the way with the narcissist. And so in your mind, you have been gaslit and trained and manipulated into thinking you don't exist unless there is somebody else in your immediate presence who you need to depend on to define who you are, to define your interests, to define your values, to define your worth. So when you go out and you date, if you don't yet have the ability to define your sense of self and self-worth, or at least are moving well in that direction, you're going to end up jumping into a relationship with somebody where the function of that relationship, you hear me say function all the time, where the function or the purpose of that relationship is to distract you from the difficult work that you inevitably will have to do. So I really like to tell people to wait at least a year, and even then be very cautious. So how to flirt after healing. Okay. So with that background in mind, it's very common for people when they start dating after this type of abuse to be extremely hyper-vigilant and hyper-aware of any tiny indication that the person that they're interacting with could potentially be a narcissist again, because they cannot go through that again. And so it's kind of their body saying, we can't handle that physically, emotionally, cognitively, mentally. So we are going on high alert, like almost like an open wound, right? Where air hits it and it's so chilling and it hurts. Your body's kind of like that, where it's picking up on even the slightest cues, which is great, meaning your brain and your body are doing exactly what it should be doing. It's protecting you. At the same time, because of that, sometimes we misinterpret some of these cues and translate them into more of the same. Perfect example I like to give. I was working with a patient once who had been divorced for about 2 years from somebody who was extremely abusive. This was a female who had left a narcissistic husband. And about 2 years later, she started dating. And I remember she said, we had been working on this for a long time. And during our session, she said, I went on a date and we were so excited for her, right? She's telling me what she wore. She's very excited. I'm validating all of this for her, telling her I'm proud of her. And then she says, but he's definitely a narcissist. And I said, okay, well, let's not diagnose somebody after date number one. Number two, let's not diagnose them after date number 2 either. But are there red flags? Sure, you want to be aware aware and mindful of any red flags, okay? Particularly love bombing, right? And I said, well, why do you think they're a narcissist? And what she said was, he opened the car door for me. And I remember pausing thinking, okay, there's going to be more to this story, right? Because that in isolation means absolutely nothing. In fact, it's polite, right? So I'm waiting, but I realized there's no more to the story. She believed him to be a narcissist because he opened the car door for her. So I had her take a step back and I asked her, well, why do you think that this is somebody who's a narcissist? And she said to me, because he opened the car door for me, does he think that I'm not capable of opening the car door myself? That's such a controlling move. He's trying to take power over me. He was trying to be, so chivalrous, but it's like, this is 20 some years ago, it's 2000 whatever. And, women can open the door for themselves. And I kind of sat there for a second and I said, okay, but, and there was a big but there. And, what I discussed with her was sometimes opening a car door is just opening a car door, right? It's not indicative of anything bigger. Now, if that behavior is in the context of other behaviors, such as not allowing you to order your own food off the menu at the restaurant, never allowing you to drive, never allowing you to pick where you want to go, never allowing you to wear what you want to wear on the date, or give comments like, why are you so dressed up and with makeup? Why does it matter if people look at you or not? Things like that. But in isolation, one behavior does not mean someone's a narcissist. And in fact, that behavior alone doesn't mean anything. It just means they open the car door for you. But if they open the car door for you and then proceed to say, you're so ungrateful. How could you be so ungrateful? I opened the car door for you. You're never grateful. And, I do all these things for you. And that can be a little bit different, right? So we want to look at those behaviors in the context of larger things, because the truth is you don't want to miss out on somebody that's healthy out of fear. Do I understand that people do this all the time? Absolutely, because dating is so unbelievably scary after a breakup like this. So I think, when we talk about flirting, I think it's really important to always come back to the present when you're dating in this context. For example, if you find that your mind starts wandering and you start overanalyzing behaviors and you start, kind of taking these narratives and running with them, you want to be able to kind of catch yourself in the moment and bring yourself back to the present and ask yourself, is this the reality of what's happening, or is this a narrative that I'm reliving, a narrative that was sold to me by somebody who didn't have my best intentions at heart? It's also hard to date because for so long you didn't know who you were. And so as you're dating, you're also simultaneously trying to figure out who you are. Maybe your taste in women or your taste in men has changed considerably since this relationship. You may not be attracted to the same type of person you were attracted to prior to this relationship. So I think the bigger thing is not so much how to flirt, because that'll come naturally if you enjoy the person, right? And they enjoy you. And if you have things in common and you have these conversations, that'll just come naturally. I think the biggest thing is is figuring out who you are, who you want to be, and the type of person that will enhance your life, not dictate your life, not control your life, not take ownership of your life, but somebody that will enhance your life so that when and if ever they're not in the picture anymore, you stay the same person. They are an enhancement. They are in addition to. They are not instead of you. You don't exist only when they're present. You exist when they are far out of the picture. So instead of flirting, why don't we focus on maintaining your sense of self and identity and not compromising that early on in the relationship, holding your ground, setting boundaries, seeing how they respond when you have to break plans, seeing how they respond when you have a disagreement, seeing how they respond when you talk about yourself and your interests. Do they allow you to speak? Do they talk over you? Do they remember your interests and your likes? Are they going overboard in the beginning? Is it love bombing? So pay attention to those things. The flirting aspect is kind of a natural consequence, let's say, of feeling comfortable being yourself. The rest will just flow. Somebody asked, what's the first step once I've told my narcissistic husband that I want a divorce? And I've told him multiple times. Okay. So if you believe that you are in a relationship or a marriage with a narcissist, whether it's a narcissistic female, narcissistic male, it doesn't matter. The first step is not telling them you want a divorce. In fact, it's best if they have no idea that you are even remotely close to leaving them. And the reason for that, there's a couple reasons. One is it's the highest risk for physical violence when they learn that you're leaving them or in the process of leaving them. So you never want to let them know that you are leaving. Telling them you want a divorce doesn't do anything except probably make the situation more complicated and more difficult for you, because they will throw everything at you to try to manipulate you into staying. That could look like efforts of love bombing. That could look like increased physical violence. That could look like increased financial abuse, legal abuse. You don't want them handling things behind the scenes with an attorney. You don't want to tell them anything. The first step would be contacting an attorney. Many attorneys will give free consults. So you want to contact somebody who is well-versed in narcissistic abuse or well-versed in what we call high conflict divorces. Because unfortunately, divorcing a narcissist is going to be a high conflict divorce. All you need in a high conflict divorce to make it a high conflict divorce is one person. And too many times I will hear judges or whoever say, the two of you need to function as adults. The two of you need to figure out a way to not argue with each other. The two of you, and no, when it's a narcissist, there is only one person who is causing that high conflict. You, the non-narcissist, just want peace. You want out. The narcissist will fight tooth and nail to make that process an absolute nightmare for you. So you first and foremost want to contact an attorney, have a consult with them, see what your options are. If there's kids involved, it may look a little bit different. You want to know financially what your options are. You just want to know what steps you need to take behind the scenes. Do you need a forensic accountant? Do you need some sort of financial advisor on board? There's a lot of things you're going to need in place and want to have set up ahead of time. Do you have somewhere to go? Will you need somewhere to go? Do you have access to finances? If they're in charge of all the finances and you tell them you want a divorce, they could easily cut you off immediately financially, which is really going to make the process difficult for you. So you want to make sure you have an attorney. You want to make sure that you have access to finances that they are unable to touch. If that means that you somehow put aside $10 a week, that's what you do. You want to make sure that you have some sort of prepaid credit card. You want to make sure that if your cell phone is in their name, that you get some sort of, pay-as-you-go type phone that they don't have access to. You want to change passwords on your emails. Maybe you want to have a bag packed in the car. You want to have your passport, social security, all of your important documents somewhere that are easily accessible for you. Again, I say this all the time. This is not a normal breakup, right? That's why when everyone's like, oh, everyone's saying everyone's a narcissist. No, no, which will lead me to my next question that I got, but no. Toxic person doesn't mean they're a narcissist. But I do promise you a narcissistic person, the breakup process with them is not the normal breakup. Even the most toxic dynamics still lack the underlying function that a narcissistic breakup does. Okay, which is no matter what, they're going to still try to gain power and control over you, punish you for leaving them, punish you through your children, punish you through finances, punish you through legal abuse. It's not the same. This is different, and it must be treated differently. In a toxic divorce, let's say, where there's not a narcissist involved, most of the time, if there's kids involved, the two parents, as much as they may despise each other, still put their kids first. In a narcissistic divorce, that narcissist will routinely use their children as a form of punishment to the other person for leaving, or just a form of punishment in general. Whereas two healthy people who have a toxic relationship, they'll still put the needs of their children first, majority of the time. Not a narcissist. Narcissist is going to punish you through your children. Period. End of story. If you're expecting the narcissist, if you told them you're divorcing them multiple times and you're expecting the narcissist to agree or get better or get on board with your decision, they're not. In fact, they're going to purposely not get on board with your decision and your choice just to punish you. So telling them and expecting anything from them to work in your favor when you tell them you want a divorce is not the right way to go. They shouldn't know about any of this until you have everything behind the scenes set up as best as you can. As best as you can. A lot of people say they don't have access to funds and they don't have anywhere to go. And if that's the case, again, you need to reach out to resources. You need to reach out to domestic violence shelters. You need to reach out to domestic violence advocates because they do have resources to help in these situations. You are never stuck. Can narcissistic tendencies be passed down from emotionally immature parents? Okay, so great question. Just because you have two parents or one parent that's a narcissist does not mean the child's going to be a narcissist. Same thing applies to if you have two parents that aren't narcissists. That doesn't mean the child's not going to be a narcissist. So the reason why I really like this question is because they use the term emotionally immature parents. Emotionally immature parents is a very broad term, but let me explain to you what that means. That could be parents that are so self-absorbed in their own needs that they don't even pay attention to the child's needs. They could be neglectful parents. They could fight constantly with each other in front of the kids. They may have substance abuse problems. They could be narcissists. They could have extremely high standards for their children that are absolutely unattainable. It could be conditional love based on those performance measures. They could be hovering. They could be overly critical. They could be, extremely condescending. I mean, there's a whole host of ways that parents can be emotionally immature. Can narcissistic tendencies be passed down? Absolutely. And what this means is that parents who model narcissistic patterns of behavior can absolutely pass down those patterns to their children. Just like a non-narcissistic parent who is still, let's say, an emotionally immature parent, a child in response to that parental emotional immaturity can develop strategies that as an adult resemble narcissistic personality disorder. So as children, we develop coping skills to be able to survive the developmental context that we live in, right? So children who are raised, let's say, by a mom that's an alcoholic or a dad that's an alcoholic will develop strategies growing up in order to survive that dynamic. And those coping strategies work for the child at that time when the child is a child. The problem becomes when those coping strategies are continued throughout adulthood for this person when the context is no longer the same. So now you're an adult, you're living independently, you're not living with your parents, you have your own job, you're financially independent, you are, able to take care of yourself, yet you're still using these same coping mechanisms as if you're still the context of two parents where one has a substance abuse problem. Your coping patterns are no longer necessary now because you don't have that. You're not in the same context, but yet you still keep using them. And so what happens is when people use these old patterns of behavior that once worked for them, but now they don't, they start to hit a wall. And it starts to impact their relationships. And they start repeating patterns because they're still using these same coping skills that are no longer necessary. They haven't adapted to a healthier environment now. So in this way, yes, you can pass on these tendencies. But what can happen too, and this is interesting, is just because you have, let's say, a parent or both parents who are narcissists, but more often than not, it's one parent that's a narcissist and the other one can appear narcissistic, but they really aren't. They just enable the behavior of the narcissistic parent because it makes their life easier. And then, you develop this whole thing where neither parent is healthy to the child. Now, when these patterns are in a child's repertoire, right? So they see this their whole life growing up. It makes sense that they're going to adopt some of these styles of interacting with other people. When they do, as an adult, and I've seen this a lot, they may very well still engage in patterns that look and make them look like they're a narcissist. Because on the surface, these patterns look exactly the same as someone who has narcissistic personality disorder. Why? Because these are the patterns that the child adopted, or these are the patterns of behavior the child developed in order to survive their upbringing. But here's the difference between patterns of behavior that were adopted through childhood that appear narcissistic but are not, versus patterns that are narcissistic and reflective of narcissistic personality disorder. On the surface, it may look the same, but the function or the underlying why a person is engaging in a pattern of behavior when they're not a narcissist is simply because it's learned. If you ask them or you tell them that their behavior is hurting you, that their behavior is in some way causing dysfunction in your life, someone who's not a narcissist will take accountability for those actions. I'm not saying easily, and I'm not saying that it's going to be easy for them to change, but they're going to be way more likely to accept accountability for their actions, accountability for the consequences of their behavior, and want to work to change, because at the end of the day, they don't want to hurt the people around them that they love. They don't want to cause chaos. It's not what they want to do. They just don't know any other way, because this is what they were taught. Now, for a narcissist, if you call attention to their toxic patterns of behavior that, again, look the same on the surface as the other, and you call attention to those patterns, they're going to get defensive. They're going to avoid accountability. They're going to tell you it's your fault. They're going to tell you you're crazy. They're going to tell you that you're overreacting. They're never going to take initiative to want to change those patterns of behavior because it worked for them. It's not their problem if you can't handle it. That's your problem, not theirs. They don't look at the chaos they're causing as problematic because they're fine with it. It's your problem if you have a problem with it. If you tell them that their behavior is hurting you, their response is going to be, I mean, what do you want me to do about it? That's who I am. Maybe you're too sensitive. So there's a difference. You have to keep that in mind. So can narcissistic tendencies be passed down from emotionally immature parents? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that it's narcissistic personality disorder. It could very well be unhealthy relational patterns learned from childhood that are simply there because that's all they knew. And they just haven't been in a context to change it. But they can when brought to their attention. What to do if your daughter is dating a narcissist and getting ready to marry him? Should we stop it, and how? Okay, so I never give personal advice, obviously, unless you're my patient. But here's the thing. Unfortunately, if you suspect that somebody in your family, a loved one, very close friend, is planning to marry somebody who's a narcissist or is with a narcissist, but in this case, we'll talk about the question, which is getting ready to marry them. Chances are that the narcissist is either still love bombing the crap out of this person. And so no matter what you say to them, they are not going to believe you. It would involve them uprooting their life and their world and looking at these love bombing behaviors as fake. And somebody who is being love bombed by a narcissist is not going to look at that in that way. They're just not. They don't have the evidence yet. Now, if this person's past the love bombing stage, let's say, and they're getting married soon, and you feel that the person they're marrying is a narcissist, I can already promise you they have already began planting the seeds of they have already started, let's say, planting the seeds of, I don't really like your family. I think they're too controlling. Your parents get involved in everything. You need to be more independent from them. I don't trust them. I don't think they like me. I don't think they have their best interests in mind. They're envious that you're becoming independent from them. They don't like that you're getting married. And these are all the things that the narcissist may be saying to their partner. And the partner at this point has already kind of been brainwashed into thinking that maybe, just maybe, their relationship with their parents until this point is not what they thought it was. Maybe their parents are controlling. Maybe their parents are manipulative. And so they're going to protect their relationship with the narcissist by slowly isolating themselves from their family and friends. And if the narcissist has already sold to your family member that Your parents can't be trusted. And then you, as the mom or the dad, say to your daughter, we don't trust your fiance. Then your daughter's going to say, see, I knew it. My fiance was right. They don't like him. He's right. Oh my God. Okay. They don't have my best interest in mind. I'm going to push them away. So the best thing you can do if your daughter, assuming she's physically safe, is be there for her, support her every step along the way. Do not allow her to cut ties with you. Do not give her anything, any type of behaviors, any type of thoughts or feelings or anything that will push her away from you, because it confirms the lying narrative that the narcissist is selling to her. So be there for her, support her as much as it kills you. Because what you don't want is you don't want your daughter to start pushing you away. Because at some point, when and if she's ready to leave, when and if she needs to escape, you're going to need to be there for her, because she is going to need you. A big reason why people feel they can't leave these abusive relationships is because they don't have anywhere to go. They don't have any support, because through the relationship, they have isolated everybody around them. So the best thing you can do is do not allow for that isolation to happen. Stay in her life, be supportive. Don't try to convince her that her significant other is a narcissist. You let her know, we love you. We are always here for you, because in the end, that is going to be the most important thing, because you are going to be needed when and if she needs to leave this relationship. As hard as that may be for you now, just understand that in the end, that's going to be the most important thing. Convincing her is not going to do what you hope it's going to do. It's going to actually push her away and confirm for her what the narcissist has probably been saying about you all along. I think we can do one more question. Any advice to parents co-parenting with a narcissist to avoid their children following in the narcissist's footsteps? So here's the thing. I don't work with children, so I can answer part of this question. The healthy parent in a co-parenting relationship is always going to be the stable parent, and is also going to simultaneously be the parent that gets the shit end of the stick. Meaning, whenever your kids come home from the narcissist's house from the weekends, it's going to take them at least 24 hours to re-regulate their emotional system. You're going to get the tears, the screaming, the dysregulated behavior. You're going to be the one that has to settle everybody. You're going to be the one that has to put out fires. And the reason why you're the one that does it is because you are the safe, stable parent. You have very little, if none, if no, control over your narcissistic ex. Can't control what they do. What you can control is what you choose to tell your children, and is what you choose to give them as life lessons. The best thing you can do for your children is give them in your home the most stable, consistent, meaning rules. They need rules. Even if they hate you for them, they need rules. They crave rules. Children crave rules. Even my kids, my 6-year-old, as much as she doesn't want rules, she has to have rules. As much as she hates the rules, she has to have them, because living in a household where there are no rules creates chaos and anxiety for children. Children need to be able to know what comes next. They need to know how to predict what will be happening in their future, immediate future. It gives them less anxiety. The narcissist is going to deprive them of that on purpose, continuously, so that they can be in charge of the children's emotions. So when they come to your house, when they are in your care, and when they are in your custody, your job is to remain stable, consistent, rule-governed, and make your home emotionally safe for them, which means if they freak out and cry because they're so dysregulated from being at the narcissistic parent's home, you sit with them, you validate them, you work with them. If you need to get them into therapy, which I don't think is a bad idea, you find somebody who is educated on narcissistic abuse in families. Because what you don't want to happen is you don't want your child to go to therapy and then the therapist say, maybe we should have, whoever the narcissistic parent is, whether it's mom or dad, maybe we should have mom, who's the narcissist, or dad that's a narcissist, come into session with you. I think it would be good to have a session with the two of you so you guys can develop better communication. No, the narcissist will deliberately never work with you to develop healthy communication. In fact, they come into the session as the parent, blame the healthy parent, blame the child for not being respectful and not listening or all of these things. And then the child leaves the session feeling so confused, scared, and they're not going to speak up again. So if you're going to get them therapy, make sure that it's their therapy and their therapy alone. And it's with somebody who understands the nuances of narcissistic abuse in the families. So the best thing to do to avoid a child from following in the footsteps of their narcissistic parent, as difficult as this is, be there for them, validate them, unconditionally show your love with boundaries and rules. The reason why they fall apart with you is because you are the safe parent. They can express whatever emotions they want around you because they know that no matter what, you're going to love them. Whereas with the narcissistic parent, they can't do that. They don't feel safe. Now, obviously, you want to make sure their behavior is appropriate with you, and that's where the rules and the boundaries come in. And they need this. They crave this. And so this is what's going to help your child. You leaving the relationship already showed your child or your children that you will not stand for being treated this way. You will not stand for this type of abuse. That's what you're showing your children. You're protecting them. A lot of people think staying in the relationship for the kids. Now, there's reasons why people stay in these relationships. Finances, nowhere to go, no support. That's a different situation. But staying in the relationship for your kids when you're with a narcissist is not a strong enough reason because it ends up doing more harm than good. Leaving the narcissist demonstrates to your children that you will not stand for this abuse and therefore they should not either. It also shows them this is not how you treat somebody because then you'll lose them. And so that alone, you already, by leaving, have already demonstrated so much more for that child that will put them in a healthy direction. Just again, remember the biggest thing, rules, consistency, unconditional love with boundaries. So that's all we have time for today, but I'm going to keep doing this because I had gotten a ton of questions. So I think it's something that really will benefit people. So I'll keep doing this. I'm going to keep a running list of questions. We'll do this every so often and I'll make sure I get to all of them. But if you're listening to this and you do have questions, feel free to send me an email off of my website at drjamiezuckerman.com or go to my Instagram at drzpsychologist and you can send a DM asking questions, comment a question, and we'll keep a running list of them and we'll address them in the podcast. I will see everybody next time on Next Up Narcissism. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.